Welcome into the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio for Thursday. I'm Tim Dennis. Boy, do we have a topic for you today, and it is a good topic at that. We're going to talk about Anton LaVey, not in the classic sense of talking about Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan. We're talking about the book Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan, Infernal Wisdom from the Devil's Den, about someone who was close to Anton LaVey, especially at the end of his life. Carl Abrahamsson is our guest. And that's the name of his new book, by the way, which is out right now on Inner Traditions imprint. And we will talk a little bit more about exactly how he knew Anton LaVey and talk a little bit about how he got in with Anton LaVey, what he learned from Anton LaVey, and more importantly, the people around Anton LaVey that he got to know and what he pulled from Anton LaVey and just what it was about him that was so mystifying, and what it was that Anton LaVey lended to the landscape of not only just of the occult, which I struggled to use that word, and I'll tell you why in a second, but to the American landscape and to the Western landscape in that. Let's bring in now to Darkness Radio, Carl Abrahamsson. Carl, thank you very much for joining us today on Darkness Radio.
Thank you, Tim. It's good to be here, and I'm always very happy to talk about this book and these memories, etc.
You know, as I begin to page through the book, I'm fascinated with someone who, at the time, and let's remember that Satanism is not that old of a concept. It really wasn't, or it really isn't. You're talking about, if you want to talk about it, of the offshoot of Crowley and then getting to Anton LaVey, the Church of Satanism, really, you're talking, mid-60s, 1966. And you're right around the same age range as I am. I'm 51. So when we look at ourselves, we don't consider ourselves old. This is not an old religion by any means. If you want to call it a religion, you wouldn't call this a religion, would you?
Well, I don't know. Some people did. LaVey certainly felt that it had the potential of a religion and the potential of a structure that could, somehow paradoxically be a uniting environment for individualists. I mean, that's the key issue. I have to say, though, that the Church of Satan as a group is definitely the first group or congregation or whatever you want to call it, community, that called itself satanic. You're absolutely right about that. Previously, there have been other self-professed Satanists, but they've usually been individuals because the nature of this incredible sort of individualistic philosophy, the Promethean, Luciferian, outsider romanticism in a way. But what LaVey did was basically develop something that he had been working with for, almost a decade before the Church of Satan. And, he had this thing called the Magic Circle, also out of his Black House in San Francisco, and the Witches Workshop, and, being immersed in this kind of role as, I wouldn't say guru, but certainly as some kind of mentor for a lot of people who were interested in the various aspects of the occult, and let's call it the diabolical in the fun sense of the word. So I think that specifically we can agree on that it's definitely a philosophy. There's definitely some magic in there, and you could call it like a self-help method with a dark taint or whatever. Yep. But it becomes a little bit problematic when it comes we talk about religion, because what actually constitutes a religion? What is it? And you should have faith. You should have some kind of holy book. Well, there's the Satanic Bible for sure. And then there's an activity that transcends like one environment. And that was true also in the beginning with what was called the grotto systems. There were these sort of local lodges in a way that were called grottos. So you had all of these basic structure points that could be, defined as a religion. So I'm not really sure how LaVey's mind frame about that, or his point of view, if it changed over time. But in the beginning, it was certainly mentioned as, Satanism is a religion for these and these and these people, and he was all in favor of that. It might have changed. I know for a fact that as a philosophy, it didn't change. Not at all.
Right.
And as a magical method or structure, it didn't change. And people today within the community and within the Church of Satan certainly refer to it as a religion. So I would say, yes, it is, but it's an odd one out. But then again, that's really what he wanted from the beginning anyway, to be the odd one out.
You know, you bring up a point of I eventually wanted to get to, but I think we can get to it here. I guess the reason why I say could be a religion, but not really, is it's missing one key ingredient, I think, that other religions have, and that is the strict dogma. There's a strict way of keeping the followers, and don't get me wrong, I'm going to get a lot of letters and a lot of emails, a lot of correspondence about this show, Carl. I'm sure you understand this.
Yes.
But there's a strict dogma to most religions that, you know, I'm sure there's rituals, there's ritualistic work in every religion. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is these are the lessons, follow the lessons. These are the words, follow the words. These are the, you know, and you don't deviate from that. You stay quick to the leash, if I may use those words. And I don't mean that derogatorily. When it comes to Anton LaVey, it was not that way, was it?
No, it wasn't that way. And also, there's a huge difference now that you mentioned this aspect of it, like having, he certainly codified or put together like things like the 9 satanic statements, and they're available in the Satanic Bible. And he penned some other ones later on that are meant to be, I don't know, like points that become pointers as recommendations of how to deal with life. But what I was getting to is like there's another huge difference. And in all of these religions, there is usually some kind of divinity, which the adherents or the believers believe in to a greater or lesser degree. But in the satanic religion or philosophy, whatever you want to call it, there is another kind of divinity, and that's the individual, him or herself. That there's nothing higher than the individual, and it's all about, you know, blooming to the greatest extent possible with all your potential and all of these things that, you know, we recognize from the language or discourse of self-help, you know, that kind of thing. You be the best you can be, etc. Very, you know, super common in America specifically.
Right.
But he really meant it in the sense that use everything you've got, including these occult techniques or methods, or even, you know, cruder manipulations. Just like, you know, enjoy life to the fullest. So that's a huge difference, saying that you could also argue that that's a legacy from Crowley in a way, because in his, you know, Thelemic notion, there is no God but man. It says in Crowley's Gnostic Mass and in other places too. So certainly this kind of super duper pro-human human individual, I should say, is something that deviates a little bit from all the classical religions. But you're true. I mean, you're right in the sense that there is a Satanic Bible, but it's not really telling you should do this and this and this and this. It is non-dogmatic, and I think maybe that's one of the reasons why it is, you know, continually popular and attracts. Not because there's some kind of, you know, messianic or evangelical force saying, come join the Church of Satan. That would be completely paradoxical. But it's this power and romanticism and, pardon the, you know, expression, the magic of this, that there is an environment and a codex in a way. There are a couple of books that he wrote that could attract people of a certain bent, people who may feel a little bit on the outside, and they are looking for something that not necessarily compensates and makes them special automatically, but there's some kind of, you know, dark romantic attraction in there to the forbidden, to the occult, and I think that works best if people can come to the oasis and have little sips to drink in a way, rather than sort of whacking the heads of the confused youngsters and saying, come join this church, it will be good for you, and we have all the answers to all of your questions. That was never the case in the Church of Satan.
You brought something interesting up there that I want to just have you expound on it for a second, and that is Anton LaVey putting the faith into self rather than a godly figure, to paraphrase there. The power of self and the power of ego, something that organized religion, would take out of the hands of people and say, no, you put your faith in your God. You put your faith in that deity. Is that a matter of LaVey seeing the faith in humans and the fact that I have faith in other humans and that we can do this ourselves? Or is this a matter of something else? Is it a matter of changing philosophy to empower a person to get them to do it on their own? Is it just a matter of philosophy, or is it a matter of really having faith in human beings?
I think it's a mix of both. People usually don't associate LaVey with some kind of altruistic idealism or humanism, but when you look at it, sort of when you break it down, the totality down, and look at the parts, there's Blanche Barton, who was LaVey's partner for more than a decade. She said something interesting in the film that later on became this book. She said that for all of his misanthropy, I believe he was an idealist, because otherwise he would never have done all these things. If he was such a great magician and enjoyed life, collecting his cars and enjoying food and people and sex, and then he could just have done that. He could have sort of solidified his black house and said, in here I rule supreme and no one else is welcome. However, he wrote many books. He invited people in. He became like a very PR savvy public figure in 60s and also into the 70s. So because he wanted not only to sort of make that money, I'm sure he wanted that too, of course, but he had a philosophy to sell. And that's the thing. Why would someone do that? Well, they believe that it's been good for them, and they want to share it in the hope that it will benefit other people too. Because, he loved Ayn Rand, for instance, and you can say that, well, that's the building block of this harsh, egotistical capitalism. Yeah, whatever, in a way, absolutely true, But it's also this kind of something that rips off all the fluff. It's a harsh but clear-cut, stripped philosophy saying, I am my own God. I can do this, and I will succeed in whatever it is that I want to achieve, And there can be no more pro-human individual philosophy than that. Then, of course, you come to the point where no one is an island. We know that from philosophy and religion. We are social animals. We need each other, and many other people that we'll never even meet. We still need them to be able to survive as a whole. Thereby, you cannot ostracize everyone and say that I am the greatest, because then basically you're psychotic and you'll end up in a place where you definitely need other people. And the thing is that I don't think, LaVey used that particular expression. I came up with this later, maybe others have too. I call it sort of altruistic egotism. When you're an egotist and you work on yourself, for yourself, to be as happy as you can be, then you will help other people by the fact that you will attract them in your happiness, and they will see that, what's this guy doing that makes him so happy? Meaning you will inspire them. And if they're really nice people, you can help them in other ways too, So, but that kind of attraction or altruistic potential wouldn't be there unless you had been egotistic and created things for yourself, whether it's, success or just general harmony or health or all these things that we need to be fully happy, that your life has a meaning. So I think that he would ascribe to that in the sense that, yes, it is egotistical. You put yourself in the driver's seat. You decide where you drive, what the direction is, what kind of vehicle you have. And that will, probably, turn some people off, but it will also attract other people who very likely will be more resonant to your own inner core in a way.
What I find fascinating is that he allows you the room to express ego but at the same time puts certain limits so that your ego doesn't spill over into someone else's space, that you're not allowed to infringe on somebody else's space. You're not allowed to be unethical with someone else's space, but that you can operate within your own parameters, and you can operate to 100 to 110% of your parameters and be the best that you can be. You just can't infringe on somebody else's. There are barriers, there are ethics. Talk to me about why this is. Why, if you're going full tilt, why is it LaVey stopped just shy of saying, you know what, go for it, pardon the expression, balls to the wall, and take whatever's there and leave the scraps for everybody else?
I think it has to do with something that is also included in the more magical writing. The writings, he was very psychologically savvy, and he stressed not only the interesting aspects, but also the importance of doing the ritual, because it is a kind of a psychodrama. You can vent things, you can literally exercise things, or what do you call it? Have a cathartic moment in the temple space, or in the what he called beautifully the intellectual decompression chamber. That's a wonderful expression. And I think that the reason why you cannot simply go fully balls to the wall is that, again, we are social animals. We need people to certainly do things for us, but it's kind of an economy, isn't it? Human endeavor and the human dynamic is an economy, and you have to give as you get, and hopefully there will be a good trade-off for your good behavior and their good behavior. So I think what I want to get to is this thing in the magical writing. It's one called the balance factor.
Okay.
And it's very important, he writes, when you are about to do ritual, meaning using this sort of, hocus pocus or occult aspects, merely as a symbolic kind of psychodrama, but it works. But you cannot go into this intellectual decompression chamber with the idea that you'll be able to transform yourself into something that you're not. So the first key here is self-awareness, self-knowledge. You have to be brutally honest when looking at yourself in the mirror and seeing that, what can I do? What is it that I have problems with? Can I use magic to sort of take a quantum leap onwards, where I feel sort of blocked, or there are things here that I don't understand. So he can't remember exactly at verbatim how he described it in the Satanic Bible, but there's this thing, if you're an awkward person and not that good looking, you cannot expect to be dating the hottest supermodels. That would require another kind of attraction, wealth, for instance. You can go down that route. However, it's best to be completely honest with who you are and what you want to achieve. And of course, then it'll hopefully be clear how you should be moving in what direction so that you can achieve that. And I think that's one thing that touches upon what you asked. This is, we are not alone. We cannot demand of the universe, that everything should be like a 3-year-old in a way, that everything should be exactly as we want it to be. And if it doesn't happen, we just sit on our ass and scream till mommy comes. It doesn't work like that in the adult world. So I think that's the reason why. I mean, there are other philosophical inspirations for him. Ragnar Redbeard's Might is Right, for instance, like Ayn Rand. It's very harsh, it's very brutal. It's a kind of a stripped version of the harshest Nietzsche. And of course, LaVey loved Nietzsche. And of course, he's a philosopher that's been very misunderstood. But basically, it's about will, right? From Schopenhauer over Nietzsche, over Crowley in a way, and certainly into LaVey and onwards, where it's only about will. And you could argue, well, there are other aspects too, certainly. But if you want to feel this kind of ultra sincere meaning in life that really fulfills you, we can all agree on that. There are certain measures, there are certain routes that we have to go, there are certain improvements that we have to make in order to become these vehicles in a way that will lead us to this point where we believe we find the utmost meaning. And in most cases, that's true. And if there is negative residue along the way, for sure, you could ascribe to what's it called? The Eastern thing with karma and stuff like that. Some things might come back and bite you in the butt if you've behaved badly. But I mean, that's just equally justified and just as if you've been accusing someone else of doing something bad towards you. That's what I mean. It's an economy. And I don't mean to become too moralistic, but It's just common sense, isn't it? Mm-hmm. That, you behave well, but you're sober and clean in your assessment of not only what's there, but also where you want to go. Is there a way to go there? Do I need to manipulate? Do I need to do some hocus pocus, etc.? It's an adventure. It's a very experimental and creative way of looking at life and your own life specifically.
You bring up two interesting points that I need to ask questions about because It's just the way my brain works here, Carl. One, you're talking about, first of all, this is going to seem like an absolutely weird question, but what would LaVey, you're talking about will and we can't sit here like 3-year-olds wishing to get everything we want in life. There's a whole industry built on that, Carl, and that's built around the power of intention. And I mean, we get things in our emails saying, if you just sit and wish, it'll come to us. What would Anton LaVey think about this industry now that's based on the power of intention? What do you think he would say about it?
Well, from a cynical point of view, I think he'd find it amusing in the sense that people can be so gullible in a way. Mm-hmm. But on a more serious note, in that sort of touches upon the occult in a way, I think he would certainly ascribe certain magical qualities to what's called new thought. That's the basis of all these things that you describe, is that thoughts can have a causative effect. I believe it, and I think that LaVey was certainly aware of that too, if nothing else, on the level of definition. Definition is very important. You can't express something magically or to other people and expect them to react or to get something back unless it's crystal clear. It's like when you go to another country, you cannot demand that people there should understand you when you keep talking in your own language. And if there's no real verbal communication, then you have to do it in sign language. There needs to be a communication in order to get things to happen. So, and where all of that begins in a clearly defined concept, a thought from our own mind that, hopefully is connected to deeper levels and our emotions and our, perhaps philosophical goals, what we want to achieve in life, basically. So I can only speculate about what he would have thought about this or that. I think that he would have found many things today wonderfully absurd and humorous, but in a slightly dark way, bordering on cynical perhaps. And I think that, again, it's a Nietzschean worldview where some people see things clearly and most people don't. You could argue that from another person's perspective, maybe they feel the same thing, so it's kind of a fait accompli. The two sides will never really fully understand each other. But as for the potential of causative thinking, I think he would have accepted that. Maybe he did accept it. I think that he could have accepted it as something very important, because before you walk on the path that you want to walk on, you need to know what kind of goal you're after. Otherwise, you could walk on a completely different path.
Understandable. Second thing you bring up is reincarnation. Was there any room in his thinking for thinking that there was a potential for reincarnation within the Satanist Bible or in Satanist thinking? Is there any room in there for that?
Yeah, there I would say no. There's reference being made in the Satanic Bible that, when people are gone, they will be remembered in the minds and sinews of the people who live and will remember them. And that's a kind of a classic attitude in people who don't share this philosophy that there is like a soul that moves on. He was definitely not 100% materialist. Certainly not when I met him and with sort of conversations about things, meaning he acknowledged the power of magic and there's some kind of like dark force in nature, etc., etc. But there was nothing of that. When you die, that's it. And that was one of the great, or is one of the great incentives to live life to the fullest, mm-hmm. which is like a key parameter to the satanic lifestyle in a way. And philosophy is that we know that we have a limited amount of time, and thereby we cannot sit and hope for something to become better, or our illnesses to go away, or money to just like trickle down from the sky, whatever. We're responsible for our own lives, and since it is limited in time, waste none of it. Just get out there and have as much fun as you can, and pleasure. It's a very Epicurean philosophy about enjoying the senses. It's an essential thing. So that's what I would say. He would say no to some kind of soul moving on. I don't know if he even acknowledged it other than like in a poetic sense, but he certainly wrote that the best way to become, if not immortal, but at least temporarily immortal, in the sense that you live on in the minds and memories and sinews of those who will live on after you're gone.
And you make reference to that in the book a little bit, in that you notice that he takes extra time with people and he makes an impression on people, and make sure that he's remembered. But it's almost like you hint that there's a little bit more, or a little bit something extra to that, or maybe I picked that up wrong. I almost picked that up as something else, like maybe he was, for lack of a better term, almost either planting a seed, or he was I don't know, doing something with energy, and expecting there to be something else at the end. But maybe I'm reading into it.
Yeah, maybe. I think you're right in the sense that, and that's the entire premise of my project. That was first the documentary film called Into the Devil's Den, and then it sort of, I wasn't ready with it. I wasn't finished with the project, so that's why I made the book, which allowed for more interview material, for instance, to fit in. And the first premise was that over the decades, he died in '97, and I cherished and I still cherish our friendship enormously. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was always this thing that, wow, it was so cool to be there. And he did show me things. And I had this impression that, why is he showing me this thing? It's so fascinating. And there was never something that was, out of context. Everything had that basic resonance that was not necessarily occult, that was not necessarily, satanic. It had to do with culture, with certain movies and authors and collecting beautiful pens, all these things that are something that friends share,
Right.
But I did feel that the reason why most of these people during the last decade, why they were welcomed in, because he wasn't quite as extroverted as he was in the 60s, of course, mm-hmm. because of, health issues, and just, he preferred that calmer environment. But the people who were invited in, they were all doers. I had my own occultural fanzines and made music and records, and a lot of other people were publishers and just very creative people who had left a mark or a dent in reality. So I think he thought that I like these people, have them come time and time again, and we'll talk, and that will be enjoyable as a friendship thing. But I also think that he did sow some seeds in there, meaning he certainly succeeded, because now you and I, in 2022, are sitting here and talking about it this very moment,
right? Yeah.
of seed sowing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a magical feat. But he would probably have been remembered if this had not happened, meaning that the friends who knew him then had all created their own memory banks in a way. His books were out there. The Satanic Bible has never been out of print since 1969.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he would have been an American cultural icon no matter what. But I think for me, it's been an interesting journey to look back and what actually happened, and you know, thank Satan. I was writing my diary a lot, and I always have, so I could go back and see what actually happened, what we talked about, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And talking to these other people, which range from people he had known a long time to his partner Blanche, and also his son Xerxes, who was only 4 years old when LaVey died. So the memories are kind of very early, but he had a lot to say about growing up in the aftermath.
Mm-hmm.
And just wonderful people who are not the same. They're not the same kind of people. They're from different walks of life. So it was interesting to talk to them. And basically, they all more or less had this feeling that he had shown them things that he loved, because he wanted so much for these things, and thereby also his own love for them, to remain in our minds, in our systems. And if we wanted to take them onwards, sort of paying it forward, not only back, like I have done with the book, for instance, then that's a beautiful thing. And I think that wasn't my incentive to delve into this, to sort of do that specifically for him. But I'm so happy that happens at the same time that I'm talking to all these other people, and we do share this basic memory that he was a very smart magician, mm-hmm. and a very generous person who shared a lot. You know, his musical knowledge, mm-hmm. his warmth and friendship and support. Mm-hmm. He's just a really great guy. And then, of course, you know, everybody who's at the end of their life, you look at things differently. And of course, you think about legacy. And it could be like a legal legacy and creative works legacy. But there's also this legacy of friendship and really nurturing the kind of things that you share, whether it's conversation or stuff. You know, it doesn't matter. It lives on.
I tell you what, Carl, let's take our break right here. When we come back, let's get the very beginnings of your interest in Anton LaVey. You'd kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier. We'll talk about that when we get back. We'll talk about your beginnings with Anton, and we'll talk a little bit deeper about some of the secrets of Anton LaVey and some of the things people may not know about Mr. LaVey. The name of the book is Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan, Infernal Wisdom from the Devil's Den. Carl Abrahamsson is the author of that book and also our guest here tonight on Darkness Radio. You're listening to the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. Welcome back to the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm Tim Dennis. Our guest is Carl Abrahamsson. The book is Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan, Infernal Wisdom from the Devil's Den. Carl, you were influenced by Anton LaVey at an early age, but tell us how you first ran across Anton LaVey.
Yeah, well, he was always hard to miss, right? You know, because he was so famous or infamous in many different worlds. And I grew up in Sweden, but, you know, at that time there were still occult bookstores, and you know, that paperback was like screaming at me from the shelf. I think many people have had the same experience. And this was in my general exploration of occult or controversial literature. I loved it from the very first reading because it was so different. Even from Crowley, you know, Crowley was so much more, you know, he was from the Victorian era, you know, flamboyant poet, and he was very technical in his writings about magic specifically. Yeah. And that's beautiful. It was just a different thing. Mm-hmm. Whereas LaVey had this amazing life story, working in the sideshow and circus and being a musician and really a carny, and also working with the wild animals at the circuses, tigers and lions, and it's just, you know, larger than life, basically.
Yes.
And I got that book and I loved it and sort of did my research as much as you could without the internet. And at the same time, I also loved American B movies and trash culture in general. I was like obsessed with it. And one of my favorite actresses was Jane Mansfield, for reasons obvious when you consider that I was a teenage boy.
Yeah.
And basically, then I found out, wow, they fucking knew each other. That's amazing. Jane Mansfield knew Anton LaVey. She was a card-carrying member of the Church of Satan, and that created a kind of a meltdown in my mind.
Yeah.
And also, at this time, there were still, men's magazines around, and they always had articles about, weird occultists like Austin Osman Spare and Crowley and LaVey, of course. And I saw all these pictures from the Black House, usually from the last years of the 60s, where it was like heyday in terms of PR and the naked ladies on the altar. And it was so cool. And basically, at that time also, I was interested in music. I started my own band called White Stains, and we made, wrote songs and made records. And the first record was a song called Sweet Jane. It was a tribute to Jane Mansfield, but also to her relationship with Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan.
Okay.
And at this time also, I was friends with Genesis Peorage, who was in Psychic TV and the Temple of Psychic Youth, and I was working with them. And Jen suggested that you should send this record to LaVey. I'm sure he would find it amusing. And I thought, whoa, that's a cool idea. I had no expectations coming from that, but Jen had the address, so I sent that first record with that very, very trashy rock and roll song with out of tune guitars. It's horrible, but good. And anyway, a couple of months later, I got a letter from LaVey acknowledging the initiative, being very happy about it, making me a member of the Church of Satan, because that was his shtick in a way, handing over the membership card saying, you're now a citizen of the Infernal Empire, as it was called.
Wow.
And as you can expect or imagine, I was absolutely mind blown. But that was also the beginning of the friendship. And a year later, I had saved up money enough to go to the US for the first time. And I met LaVey and Blanche and also Kenneth Anger and many other very magical people. And then I went back basically every year up until 1993. And then he died in 97. And we hung out at the Black House and talked a lot. And he read to me from books from his collection. And we listened to him playing in music. Incredible experience. I watched a lot of movies, went out to restaurants. It's just like, friendship stuff. Very, very nice. But he was also, and this is also very important, he was very supportive. And that's important for like a very young man, seeking either a father figure or a grandfather figure even, that the creative stuff that I was doing in terms of music, but mainly in the writing and publishing, he acknowledged and was very supportive of. For instance, I had this little fanzine called The Fenris Wolf. Now it's like a book journal, but back then it started very humbly. But he allowed me to use his writing, for instance, like pieces of writing from their newsletter called The Cloven Hoof. And just very, very supportive, because he knew that it would carry weight if I had the LaVey stuff in the Fenris Wolf. So yeah, that's basically it was so smooth, so such a fast ride in a way from receiving that first letter, and then a year later I was sort of inside, and then of course after the first visit, then will I be welcomed back again? And yes, absolutely, that happened. I would say almost every year. I tried to go to the US as much as I could.
So let me ask you real quick, Carl. When you start getting LaVey's writings for the Fenris Wolf, does that automatically start circulation getting stronger and stronger throughout the different issues that you put out?
I don't remember even the circulation of those early things. It started out as a fanzine, then it became a book, and it became a better book and a better book. So in a way, yes. But I think it had to do the improvement and sort of greater circulation didn't specifically have to do with these specific writers. I think it was just like a better product in general.
Okay.
But of course, if I wrote something or Mr. Nobody wrote something about something interesting, it doesn't pack the same punch as if you have a piece by LaVey, So of course it helped. Absolutely. The same was true for the writings by Genesis Peorage, who was well known in underground and musical circles. So I was a networker early on. That had to do with the fact that I had musical fanzines earlier on, like in the mid 80s. So I knew that sort of behavior and that kind of communication, and it came in handy, I have to say. And then as I didn't lose interest in music or movies, I just became more and more interested in the occult, and specifically the occultural, where these things merge, how culture is affected by magical things. So he was a great help in that, and I am forever grateful still for that kind of youthful, the older infusion of inspiration into a youthful creative person.
I've got to think, just networking wise, that's a huge boost.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, there was so much in my mind, I call it magic. There was so much magic around, because at this specific time, before I went on the first trip, I was at the Stockholm University doing film studies, film theory, and writing my thesis about Aleister Crowley's influence in Kenneth Anger's films, and I was just wrapping that up. And I knew that I had I had written a letter to some address I had to Anger, but it was basically, he was in Hollywood, LaVey was, of course, in San Francisco. After that first evening in San Francisco with LaVey, we had talked about these things, of course. He told me as I was leaving that he had just been on the phone with Anger saying that we could meet in Hollywood as soon as I go there. So he was definitely a door opener on so many levels. And I'm still, I've lost touch with Anger now, but we have been in touch over the decades on a friendly. I even made a documentary about Anger too some years ago. Yep. So in that sense, these are all remnants from this very first super magical trip.
There's another networking, I guess, kind of networking, but it's kind of unusual. A lot of people, some people don't know, some people do know that the song Hotel California was written about the Black House. Can you tell me a little bit of background about that?
Well, I wish I could, in the sense, I wish I could as an objective journalist having all the facts, which I don't. But it's such an amazing story, And if you listen to it, it is a great song in itself. Yeah. No one can deny that. And when you listen to the lyrics, there's so many references, like, the captain. It was one of his nicknames was the captain. And this thing where you can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave. Sort of because the membership in the Church of Satan is for life. Things like that. And if nothing else, it's an amazing myth that because it's so close to a potential objective truth. I believe that in the late 60s and early 70s, it was an incredible extroversion. He was very out there, ready, willing, and able to do PR in all kinds of senses. And he hung out a lot, not only in his Black House, he was in LA a lot. In Hollywood a lot. He wanted to move in the direction of being more and more involved with movies.
Okay.
And so for him to not have met a lot of celebrities who, even if they're not seriously interested, everybody wants to shake hand with as it calls, the Black Pope. He was called the Black Pope. And he was a media figure, being on, Carson several times, and in all the international magazines, and in Life and Time, and I don't know. He was just already then an icon. So it's not unlikely that he met the Eagles, other rock bands, filmmakers. There are these wonderful pictures of him with Sammy Davis, and I think it's just like people then, as they are now, maybe even more now, are so celebrity conscious. So if you can take a selfie with a celebrity, that increases your own value in a way.
Oh, sure.
So whether or not Sammy Davis was seriously interested in Satanism, no one can deny it's a fucking killer picture. It's amazing.
Yeah.
and that's also true for the kind of mythic bricks that come from this thing with Hotel California. If you listen to the lyrics and you're somewhat savvy about the history of the Church of Satan and LaVey, and you can hear a lot of things in there. And I believe it's true. I don't believe it's merely my own mind interpreting and finding meaning that means that I want it to be in a certain way. There's just too much in there to not make sense.
Well, there's a lot of lyrics that if you don't know anything about Anton LaVey or the Black House, they don't make any sense. I mean, they just don't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, it's also something, I can only speak for myself again. I mean, it is every classic rock radio station plays that song at least like twice a day, So of course, the likelihood that you'll hear it, but I'm not kidding. Whenever I've been in San Francisco since then, the Black House was demolished. It was torn down in 2001.
Okay.
But I was there before that, and we always used to drive past it just to sort of wave to the house. And then now it's just some ugly condo building.
Oh.
So I don't wave anymore. I just drive by. But I kid you not, when we have the radio on, it's always somewhere there on California Street. Comes Eagles, Hotel California, and it's so. Unlikely that I just have to acknowledge the fact that there is such a thing as magic, there is such a thing as synchronicities, and I enjoy it greatly, regardless what people think.
I bet. In this book, you have, as you've mentioned, you have interviews with the people closest to Anton LaVey, and as you've mentioned, there's probably the most ironic, sad story, at least in my book. The most ironic, sad story is the story of his son Xerxes, who you mentioned. LaVey passed away when Xerxes was only 4 years old. If you could encapsulate for us the feeling that Xerxes has about his father, what he remembers about his father, and what he wishes he could carry on as a legacy for his father.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when memory is a very tricky thing, because we're talking basically about cerebral memory, the memory function of the brain, and when you're that young, it will dwindle. It will fade. You can have memories, and even if they migrate into you're 6 years old or 7 years old, they morph into something else that could be called like an emotional cluster, for instance, of a good or a bad thing. So I think he told me that he has memories of the house, certain spaces in the house, and objects and things like that. And of course, with the mother, there's a continuity that's still valid throughout throughout his life. But the what he remembers is mostly slightly later on. The feelings and the sympathy he got from a lot of people who were Satanists and the Church of Satan people, being supportive of Blanche and of him, and helping her take care of business and all of these things. And of course, that carried on too. He's wonderful guy, but he's also gone through an individuation process that has not been colored specifically by his father. He's very much his own man on his way to becoming his own self-made man in the best possible way. So he's very aware of how these things function, and certainly he has weighed things back and forth. And we talked about that in the book also, about when you, in a way, deny your own celebrity potential as being a kid of someone who is famous, it's almost like a crime in America. It's like you're doing yourself a disservice, and you shouldn't. But he certainly has not used the legacy for his own benefit, and I don't think he ever will, because that's not his trip. He's just on his own trip. And we talked about that too, and he I can't remember exactly how he put it, but this thing where I think my father would have been proud of the fact that I'm going my own way. And I think that's absolutely true. He would have been proud of Xerxes and all the things he's achieved so far. But then again, you never know what it could do. Sometimes I'm sure when you're growing up as a young boy, for instance, going through these stages of teenage years and prepubescence and all these stages, and you don't have your father to communicate with about these things, it must be hard, And then, of course, because when you bring him up as a person, thinking about, the father, then that image or concept or whatever you want to call it, there's a kind of a construct based on other people's projections and also LaVey's own projections, the media personality, for instance. Where is the father in all of this that you want to have close and talk to about very private things? So I think I'm sure it's true for everyone who doesn't have a parent, that you try to construct a being, but it's impossible to construct without these projections. And when these projections are strong and quite often negative, then it's going to be a problem. And I think that has actually helped him to individuate himself in a much stronger, clearer, and more defined way as himself. And I think that's a good thing.
Because LaVey built this church, because he built this institution, we can call it an institution because it really is. It's survived time, and it continues to survive time, and it continues to grow. Do you believe at the end of his life that he and Blanche got together and decided, even though I've spread this knowledge and I've spread the seeds to many people and I've cultivated heirs for this institution, do you believe that Xerxes was to be his heir, that was his intention, and that maybe that's not quite the way it's happening?
I think maybe on some level, on some, emotional level, magical level, idealized level, certainly that could have been true. But on the other hand, it's also so paradoxical within the philosophy to ascribe those or project those kinds of hopes on other people, even your own son, because the philosophy is all about the individual finding out what he or she wants to do, and that's it. There's no discussion. And he was also, just as a side comment, LaVey said when he had a falling out with his daughter Zina in the early 90s, I think, and she was like feeling completely estranged and sort of, what do you call it? You deny him or well, she didn't want to have anything to do with it and publicly said that, I am no longer the daughter of Anton LaVey. I mean, you can bet that hurt. It must have hurt a lot. But he said also publicly in some interview that, we want our kids to be happy and strong and individuated in a way. And if she wants to go down that route, I'm happy about that. Then how much it hurt while he was saying that, we can only speculate. Right. I'm sure it did. But in terms of Xerxes, I think that the relationship with Blanche and becoming a father at age whatever it was, 63, right, must have been so vitalizing. And Blanche said also that all he wanted to do was just to be at home and be with Xerxes and her. And it's completely understandable because he was already then in failing health in a way. So I think that it was a manifestation, a fruit of love. It was a fruit of wanting to feel vital and whether that's, some kind of magical operation to secure, a magical heir or whatever, maybe that was in there. I think that was not a key thing. I don't think that was a dominant factor in the fact that they created a child. I think he would have been very, very proud of Xerxes today. And one of the reasons for that is that he's not a sycophant in a way, or not someone who's bought into I could have been the leader of the Church of Satan because I am the son. I think LaVey would have simply been more proud of him saying, like he's saying today, that I'm doing my own thing. Sorry, thanks, but no thanks. I am my own.
You also sit down with Blanche Barton and have a conversation with her. I don't want to, again, my goal is not to give away the book, because the book has a lot of interesting interviews. It has a lot of interesting content in it. Among the things that are in here is an interview with yourself by Vanessa Sinclair. There's an interview, Genesis interviews Anton LaVey in here, which is extremely interesting.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And Anton LaVey, in his own words, there's excerpts from Hail Satan in the book as well, which people need to, especially if they're fans of LaVey and want to get a different perspective, is interesting, very interesting to read in that. Tell me a little bit about where you see Blanche because you got to know Blanche from the minute you stepped into the Black House to now. Tell me how her relationship has changed since the time you met her to losing LaVey, and the aftermath of that. What do you see in her life and how her life has changed?
I think that we can only speculate, the level of, I don't know, a chaos and emotional turmoil and all these things that happen when a loved one passes. And when you're a fairly new-baked mother also, and you have the responsibility and basically have run the Church of Satan, not completely alone, but still carrying a lot of responsibility. And then suddenly the foundation or the pillar is no longer there. It was, of course, a very, very hard blow. And I got to know them almost 10 years before that happened. So then it was more like a very loving relationship. They were having a good time, lots of interesting people coming by. Things were working on new book projects, and just very, very creative. It was like an idealized life in a way, and no major problems. Then, of course, there were incidents of failing health, and that I guess made you aware that this won't last forever. So I'm thinking that Blanche was preparing in her mind, at least, even though it was painful, to what's going to happen when the inevitable happens. And then when that did happen, I think she was strong strong enough to deal with it very well. And she did have a backup. She did have a support group or support individuals within her own family, but also within the Church of Satan. So it was kind of, I would say, of course, a painful transition, but it could have been much worse. And I think there were some other blows later on when the house was torn down, for instance. That must have been very hard. They tried to have someone, buy it or at least turn it into some kind of museum. It would have been a great museum for San Francisco. Yeah. But when that didn't happen, then she was literally on her own with Xerxes and taken care of by friends. So I think that necessitated in her, really evoking her strength, which she has. And again, becoming her own, not leaving any legacy behind of the Church of Satan. She worked with all these things, but it also happened that she decided to share it with Peter Gilmore and Peggy Nadramia, who are still the high priest and high priestess to this day. And that, I think, was probably a nice thing for her to do in terms of just, sharing the responsibility. But since then, she's a wonderful person, and I'm so happy about this project because that really brought us together again, and we are in touch occasionally now, and it's a joy. And we invited her to speak at a conference that we organized in Italy a couple of years ago, and then of course we met in the US to work with with the film specifically, and then the book also, and getting to meet Xerxes, and I'm very, very happy about that. And Blanche is a very, very strong woman, super creative. But here we come to the central thing that's so important. She is her own. And even though she will always be associated with Anton LaVey, she is certainly just not, his partner or his this or his that. She's an amazing woman who's also now, just recently, last year, released this book that's also great. It's called We Are Satanists, where she tries to sum up her thoughts and ideas and interviews, and how Satanism, in this Church of Satan style, is moving on into the future. So she's very active, and she's very, I would say, influential in her being so true to herself as she is. Okay. An inspiring force, basically.
All right. That's good. That's very good. I'm trying to think of how to put this next question, because it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Obviously, the Church of Satan is not what it was when LaVey was around. How do you see the Church of Satan in 2022?
I see it as very, very good. And of course, I'm partial because I have so many friends there. Mm-hmm. But how do you deal with an organization that is not made to, attract people to congregate and get together and have like weekly meetings and all of these things? And I'm not thinking specifically of the pandemic and things like that, but just like it's different. It's like we said, it's an environment where, in a way, non-joiners can join, where unique people on their own path can find people, perhaps not of like mind when it comes to the entire, preferences in life, but certainly of like mind when it comes to certain attitudes and cherishing the fact that you feel unique and you feel an affinity with this kind of dark romanticism of the diabolical as codified by LaVey. So how do you deal with that in 2020? Well, first of all, you have to have an online presence. That's right. If you want to be visible at all in our culture, you have to have that. And I have to say that the Church of Satan website for me is like, it's a candy store. There's always new stuff added to it, not just in the news flow, news feed, but archival material. My wife and I have this conference thing going on, and now recently it's been care of Morbid Anatomy Museum, so it's online. We had Peggy Nadramia the other night talking about her research about how the Satanic Witch, which was basically LaVey's second or third book, depending on how you see it, was written, conceived, published. It's very exciting stuff. Mm-hmm. So they're doing a lot of beautiful archival work, and they're also making that accessible through the Church of Satan website. So it is kind of a dark beacon for people who are attracted, curious, who want to join, perhaps. Same thing for Twitter and the other platforms. It's just I don't envy the people who have to sort of fight off or disregard all these morons who still cannot get it, what it is. Instead of going to the website and looking at the FAQ, they would rather ask things on Twitter endlessly, giving biblical quotations, whatever. So in that sense, but it's hilariously funny. The people who are running that, they're so smart and funny, and the one-liners that are punched back, they're priceless. Sometimes it's like you can go there just to have fun. So the Church of Satan Twitter and the website, it's there, it's doing its job, and I don't know how well it's doing in terms of membership and stuff, but it seems to be a very healthy environment, run very professionally, and so that's probably my answer to your question. I think that it's different, but it also has to do with the culture now is different than from back then. When LaVey died, there was a primordial Church of Satan website, and they were exploring things like like these forums, but now it's just such a different thing. So it has taken a dominant precedence in a way. It's and people find it, they can find it very easily. So, and I think LaVey would appreciate all of these things. It was never a question of, trying to be esoteric for its own sake. It was just, back then it was a different story, and you had to go through news syndicates and photojournalists who were syndicated with men's magazines. It's just different.
Yeah, speaking of it, when it comes to news journalists and whatnot, it seems like when we hear stories these days involving the Church of Satan, it has to do with state capitals and it seems like it's protests to having to do with a Pledge of Allegiance or some sort of monument and wanting to put something of equal rights into a state monument. Do you want to comment anything on that or any of the battles that have happened in any of those states?
Yeah, I think that that's not necessarily something that comes from the Church of Satan. They have always been one environment that is very clearly defined. And even though there can be official points of view, like, for instance, the Church of Satan, of course, support LGBTQ things, and there's even a Baphomet flag with the rainbow colors, and they supported the Black Lives Matter thing. But that's kind of rare. But it's when push comes to shove, they are vocal about certain issues. What you're referring to is having to do with the Satanic Temple, which is a completely different group.
Okay. My apologies.
That is satanic in a different way. It's very much based on activism, whereas the Church of Satan is strictly, conservatively egotistical.
Okay.
You stick to your own regimen and you do your thing. But of course, if you want to get together with people of like mind and do some kind of activism, that's fine too. So the Satanic Temple is quite a different story, and they are the ones who've created almost artistic provocations with this Baphomet statue, for instance, and the Ten Commandments should be eradicated from official buildings, gardens, or whatever. So that's a different story.
Okay, my apologies. That was my mistake for messing that up. I apologize for that. And I guess lastly, there's an interesting quote in the book, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this and wanted you to expound on this. You mentioned being in LaVey's presence, and there is I believe the passage goes, and I'm going to paraphrase here, if you don't mind, Carl. Being in his presence, and it's not the first time that you see him. It's not the last time you see him. It's every time you see him. You almost mentioned like there's a haze, and it's almost like time kind of goes by quickly, and you almost like you forget when you leave. It's almost like being hit by a magical presence when you're in his presence. Some people would say, well, you're just kind of awestruck, or you're in his presence and you're overwhelmed. And I didn't get that sense of presence. And I know what you're talking about when I read it, because there are just some people that when you're in someone's presence like that, they just have it. That's the way to put it. When you look at it from your perspective, how would you describe it? What was it that Anton LaVey had in your presence that attracted you?
Yeah, I think that it's a very good question, and I've certainly roamed my memories. And again, I'm very happy that I wrote diaries back then, and I still do. It's kind of invaluable. But what we did and what was said is not the same as the emotional experience of the moment. It's kind of hard that then you need the memory and visceral memories. And for me, it was I came into that thing having my own projections on him, the historical person, the person I admired, that had inspired me. So that was already something that you could call a positive reinforcement. But in the actual time and space, meaning when we came back from dinner somewhere and went back to the Black House and, had some coffee and listened to him play music, all of these things that happened were, at the moment I felt, oh, this is so cool, but it was more than cool, because it was a change of vibration. Mm-hmm. Music was his main magical tool, and not just like playing a tune to accentuate an atmosphere in the ritual chamber. He used certain melodies that he knew in his head to affect change, whether in the room or farther away, through some kind of logic of the butterfly effect. Something that is amplified, sent out, will affect other people and other spaces. For me, that was like going into magic school, but in a completely new way. It wasn't Crowley. It wasn't these sort of Freemasonic structures where you pass through degrees and initiation ceremonies and stuff like that. This was like so hardcore, because even though everything was jolly and fun and we were laughing because he was such a funny guy, very much in the same vein as Chico Marx, when he was playing mm-hmm. the keyboards, mm-hmm. Showmanship to the very fingertip. But there was always something there that was so powerful in his skill. I guess also it was the intention. Right? He played that thing for a certain reason, thereby it was magical. And the same thing when I wrote about that incident in the book also. We were in the Purple Parlor, which was like the living room, basically, where he also watched movies. And then he sort of took down a book from his shelf and started reading to me. And it was amazing. And it was Ben Hecht, wonderfully successful scriptwriter in early Hollywood, he began by writing like very weird horror fiction in a way. So he wrote from that, and he also he read from that to me, and he also read from another Ben Hecht book, and it's sort of really amplifying the importance that I should get that he's reading Ben Hecht to me. And of course, I felt honored. I vaguely knew who Ben Hecht was mm-hmm. at that time. But of course, I've read a lot by him and find him very, very inspirational. And in part, I would say in big part, because of LaVey pointed that out to me at the time. In these moments, it was not just like taking a book, reading the book, reading a section. There was some kind of change going on in the room, and I could feel it viscerally. And when I looked at him, there was something, he had been working so much with big cats like tigers and lions and stuff.
Yep.
And, this kind of big feral presence with almost like, what can you call it? Like a gleam in his eye. There was just something really awe-inspiring and powerful. Then again, I'm not denying that it could be my projections, but for me, it doesn't matter, because there was something there in the moment, because we weren't just chatting about some movie. Mm-hmm. He was reading specifically to me, and I sure as hell listened. I paid attention, because I'm sure he had his share of assholes who were just like ungrateful when he was trying to give them gold, and they just said, what the hell is this weird tune? What the hell is this? I don't like this movie. Then you were out.
Yeah.
But the thing is that he showed you the good stuff, and if you were only open to that, then that did create a change in my life. For instance, here in my office, I have a framed check on my wall, framed from David Selznick to Ben Hecht for, let's see, $1,300. Was some payment for some script doctoring he did for let's see, Selznick. I can't remember if it was which movie studio it was, but anyway. So I have that here as a sort of memory, or as a reminder of that specific moment, and the importance of Ben Hecht, of course.
And here I'm thinking only $1,300.
Yeah, but you know what? That was a lot of money back then. He was the most well-paid scriptwriter in Hollywood.
That's true. That is true. I don't know why it automatically, and I'm not thinking of inflation and things like that, but but then automatically that's where my brain goes. I'm not thinking of how many years ago that was, Carl. I'm just thinking of how incredibly inexpensive that is to get a script doctored. I suppose now in today's money, that's quite a bit of money.
It's a lot. Yeah.
When I think of, and you think of magician through and through, and when you think of Anton LaVey, and you're talking about sound waves as a spell. And nowadays, when we think of sound waves, we can use sound waves to manipulate so many things in hypnotherapy. And you almost wonder at that point if LaVey's ahead of the curve when it comes to, hypnosis and using certain keys in sound waves. And if he was acutely aware or occultly aware, see what I did there?
Yeah.
And using things to, kind of get ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
There's many fascinating things in this book, and I want to encourage people to go out and get the book. Again, the book is incredibly fascinating. Carl Abrahamsson is our guest. The book is Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan: Infernal Wisdom from the Devil's Den. Carl Abrahamsson has been our guest, and we have a link to the website to get the book in the description of the show. So go ahead and click on that link and get the book right now. It is a fascinating book, folks. I've taken a spin through the book, and it is a quick read at that. Also, some fascinating pictures, Carl. I wanted to mention that as well. Pictures of you with Anton LaVey and with a lot of the different people that are in the book. Pictures of actually inside the different houses, and you get kind of a candid look. One of the things you mentioned, I've got to mention it real quick before we leave today. You mentioned Anton LaVey's look, and you mentioned a common interest between the two of us, which is the Flash Gordon movies and the Flash Gordon serials of the 30s, and mentioning that he used to keep the look of Ming the Merciless. Which to me is just the minute you said that, I was just like, yep, that's exactly the look. And I was always that was one of my number one villains of all time growing up, was Ming the Merciless.
Absolutely. It's so fantastic. And also it sort of caters to his love for kind of a carny style. It's like this uber dramatic persona in a way that is elegant, flamboyant, and has piercing eyes, and is just larger than life. Of course, people will gravitate towards that person, and then they can do their magic. It's like signpost magic in a way. It is. Glamour.
I think, in order to be, and you have to admit, no matter what your stance is on Anton LaVey, he was, and he even has thanked them in the past. He's thanked multiple people who are amazing marketers. And if you look at the Church of Satanism, for anything else, one of the greatest marketing firms of all time, right down to the logo. I mean, it's everything is well marketed. And I think there's no better reflection when it comes to marketing than yourself. And I think that Anton LaVey really had it down from himself to everything that he ever built. He knew exactly how to pluck all the strings of people's interests. If nothing else is said about Anton LaVey, positive, if you have to say one thing positive about everybody that you've ever come across, if we played that game and you had to say, if you didn't have a positive thing to say about Anton LaVey, for anybody out in our listening audience, you have to say that he was one of the most brilliant marketers of all time that was out there, most definitely, because he was a brilliant mind when it came to that. And I'm not disparaging the man. Don't get me wrong. But that's, I mean, absolutely. He that's why I think he attracted so many people in entertainment.
Yeah, absolutely. No, he was PR savvy beyond belief. I mean, just nurturing friendships with people who are, paparazzi and journalists, and really striking up long-term relationships with them because he knew the value of being seen. That was his goal, just as it is for kids now. But the difference then, he actually had something to sell, not just a little twerky dance on TikTok,
Mm-hmm.
And it worked for him. It worked. Absolutely.
Okay, before I leave you today, most famous person you got to meet because of Anton LaVey?
Wow, that is such a hard question. I don't know. For me, he is the most famous,
okay, sure.
most important. I mean, I met Kenneth Anger via him, mm-hmm. and I will say, in my mind, LaVey is more important for me. But at that time, I really idolized Kenneth Anger so much. So yeah, that was a direct result of my meeting LaVey. Yeah.
Okay, great. And of course, you never got to meet Jayne Mansfield.
In my dreams, I did.
In your dream, well, we all have, I think, in our dreams. That's for sure. And I think we all would have liked to have met Marilyn Monroe in our dreams too. But
yeah.
Is there an interesting outtake about Jayne Mansfield you can share with us before we go?
Well, there were, there's always speculation about whether or not they had an affair, whether or not they had sex, But there was information coming forth in my research for this project where people who were there at the time said they had seen Mansfield in the room, in the temple. They had the ritual chamber in the nude several times. So if she was just trying out to be a nude altar lady or something else had happened, I don't know. It's sometimes it's best to let these things be highly speculative. It's more fun.
Hey, I like the fun of the speculation there. That's more than enough for me. Yeah. I'll take that. Thank you, Carl. Yeah. Again, Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan, Infernal Wisdom from the Devil's Den. Carl Abrahamsson has been our guest. Carl, I want to thank you so much for joining us today on Darkness Radio.
Thank you, Tim. It was great.
It was my pleasure entirely. I appreciate it, Carl. Folks, I want to remind you before we leave you today that Darkness Radio is partnering up with the UFO Disclosure Symposium, and you can get your tickets right now by clicking on the other link that's in the description of this show. It's real simple. You just go to the link in the description of the show that's underneath the link for this book, and you can get in on one of 3 ticket packages, either the VIP ticket package, the general admission ticket package, or there's a 3rd ticket package that allows you to simply view it from home. It's a 3-day UFO Disclosure Symposium. It will take place May 27th through the 29th, and they will be showing 4 previously unshown UFO videos. And these were previously classified videos that will be shown at the conference. It's taking place in Vernal, Utah. And again, there's a link in the description of this show. It is the UFO Disclosure Symposium, May 27th through the 29th in Vernal, Utah. Among the guests, Dr. Travis Taylor, Dr. Michael Boyd, Professor Avi Leb, Ellie Marzulli, James Keenan, Andy Marshall, Micah Hanks, pilot Chris Leto, many, many more. VIP tickets, general admission tickets, and live stream access for all 3 days. And it is available worldwide, globally. The live stream access is from the comfort of your own home. You can attend this conference, and I'm encouraging you, please go to that link, check out ticket prices, and again, it's affordable. It's a great conference, and you're going to be seeing some stuff you've never seen before, having to do with UAPs and UFOs. And it's going to be groundbreaking research. It's going to be revealed at this UFO Disclosure Symposium. Check it out at that link that's below the link for the book. Check out both links, by gosh. And we will see you again next week. Again, take care of yourself and each other. And we will see you next week here on the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio.